and welcome to Everyday Simple Somatics, a podcast dedicated to helping you find healing through your body's natural wisdom. I'm Dr. Christine Baker, and I'll be your host. If you are a trauma survivor of any kind, it is quite possible that you have experienced something called decision paralysis. And so that is this experience of I've got multiple choices, and I literally cannot stop ruminating about which choice is correct for me, and that leads me to actually just not make a choice. And so here's what I want to start the podcast off encouraging you with. Decision paralysis is not just this experience of having a hard time choosing. It's actually a nervous system response. So when we are overwhelmed, our nervous system can literally just kind of freeze out, and that can make it impossible to choose something. And so if you experience a lot of different choices as overwhelming, your nervous system takes that in as a threat and can kind of say, this is too much. I'm just going to shut down. And so today we're going to talk a bit about what's actually happening in your brain when that happens. And then I'm going to lead you through a quick somatic practice that you can use when you are struggling between a couple of different choices. So for those of you that don't know me, like I said, I'm Dr. Christine Baker. I have been a trauma therapist for over 13 years. I'm also a somatic experiencing practitioner, which just means that I'm a person that believes strongly that trauma is not just an event that happens to us, but rather it is the imprint left in our body by that event. And therefore, the body really needs to come alongside us in the process of trauma recovery and our mental health journeys in general, right? And that was really kind of the catalyst for this podcast. I wanted to make somatic healing really accessible and simple. I think that where we really begin to see big changes in our nervous system is through rhythms of nervous system regulation and resourcing. And my hope is that if you find one of these episodes that you really relate to, like, oh, yep, that's me, decision paralysis all day long, this practice that I'm going to share today can become a rhythm for you. And so you can really start to feel some changes in your nervous system. So yes, what the podcast looks like. It looks like every week I kind of choose a new topic related to a mental health struggle or a relational struggle. And then I give you a specific somatic practice that you can do to help support that struggle. And if you are new to nervous system regulation, I'd love to invite you to the first 10 episodes of this podcast. I call them the Essential Foundations. And these are kind of like the basics of the nervous system, basics of somatic healing. And so this can be a really great place to start if you are new to this world. So if that sounds interesting to you, I'd love to invite you to like and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you are listening or watching. All of those little clicks really do help other people find these resources as well, and I very much appreciate it. Okay, so let's talk brain science for a second. Neurologically, decision paralysis occurs in our prefrontal cortex, which this part of our brain right here is what's responsible for our executive functioning. So when this part becomes overwhelmed, it can kind of go offline, right? And so Dr. Bessel van der Kolk talks about this in his research on trauma, how kind of this unresolved trauma or chronic stress can really hijack our ability to make clear, objective choices. Because when we are in a state of chronic stress or unresolved trauma, our nervous system is prioritizing survival over decision making. Good choice, right? I think a really great way to explain what's actually happening here was given to us by Dr. Dan Siegel. He has this little exercise where he calls it flipping your lid. So if you are listening and not watching on YouTube right now, I just have my hand up kind of in a fist with my fingers over my thumb. Okay. So this is my brain, and all of my fingers kind of represent that prefrontal cortex and executive functioning. And then my wrist down here is kind of representing my brainstem, or where all of my survival instincts are held. And so when I become overwhelmed by something, I can flip my lid. And so what I just did, for those who are listening and not watching, is I lifted my fingers up. And so now I've just got no prefrontal cortex online, and now I'm just in my brainstem. And so what we really need to do is help show our brain, you are not under threat. You are actually safe. And so when we do that, we can bring, and now I'm pressing my fingers back down over my thumb, we're bringing our prefrontal cortex back online. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, when you kind of get in these decision paralysis moments, is your lid flipped? Because if it is, then we've really got to work to help you feel safe first before we can return to actually make the decision. So with that being said, we are going to do a little practice together here today. We're going to start by just doing a grounding technique to kind of help us, like I just said, connect to safety before we get into any kind of decision making. And we are going to do a little body scan to kind of check in on what is the current state of our nervous system before we move into any kind of decision making. Then we are going to do a little somatic decision exploration. Okay. And ultimately what that's going to look like is the left side is going to be option A, the right side is going to be option B, and we're going to practice leaning or stepping towards the left or the right, and then just noticing what happens inside when we do that. And then we'll just take a moment to kind of reflect on what our experience was with that decision. Okay. So if you are ready, and if that sounds like something that feels okay for you to try, I'd love to take a moment with you to get grounded before we get into the rest of our exercise. So I would love to invite you to just start by getting your feet on the floor. And just start by noticing the support of the floor underneath your feet. Maybe seeing if you can rest your feet even just like half an inch more into the floor beneath you. And then if it feels okay, I'd love to invite you to just notice your seat underneath you, maybe noticing the support of the chair you're sitting on or the bed you're laying on. And just seeing if you can really allow yourself to take in that support instead of just like sitting on top of it. Once you've kind of taken in some sensations of support, I'd love for you to just notice where in your body feels nice to be with. Like maybe your arms feel heavy. Maybe it feels good to just like sink into your chair. Maybe it feels like your shoulders drop a little. Whatever it is, just spend a little time putting your attention on what feels nice to be with inside. And if nothing feels nice to be with inside, maybe look for something that feels neutral to be with. And once you kind of feel connected to your body, I'd love for you to just take a second and get curious about the state of your own nervous system. Are you feeling kind of activated or anxious or angry? That might be more of that sympathetic fight or flight energy. Are you feeling more shut down or numb or dissociated? Could be more of that freeze kind of energy. Or maybe you notice that you feel relatively calm and present, kind of more in your window of tolerance. And so whatever your answer is to that, it's okay. If you're feeling more kind of hyper arousal with sympathetic or hypo arousal with freeze, I'd love to invite you to just take a few more moments to do some grounding and orienting. You may even go back to some of those episodes in the Essential Foundations to kind of help with those regulation skills that are in there, and do that work first. Because like I said, if our lid is flipped, if we're not feeling safe, this next part of exploring a decision is going to be really hard / impossible. And so we want to get our body back to at least neutral, hopefully feelings of safety before we go into step 3. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to stand up for this next part and see if you can kind of be in a place where there's some open space and you can like move around safely. Okay, we're standing. So I want you to first start by, let's just think about a decision that you need to make. Let's not make it the biggest decision of your life, like not like, do I take the job or do I not take the job? But maybe something smaller like, what do I want to make for dinner tonight? Or should we skip soccer practice or not tonight because of potential storm, or, whatever it is, just something a little bit smaller. And once you've kind of identified the two options in your decision, like you're choosing between these two paths, right? We'll call one option A and option B. What we're going to do is we're going to stand kind of hip width apart, take a deep breath, kind of center yourself a little. And I want you to imagine that option A is on your left and option B is on your right. And so once you've kind of identified option A over here, option B over here, I want you to just close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, notice the floor supporting your feet. And then whenever you're ready, I want to invite you to very slowly, guys, lean towards option A. Just a subtle lean. We don't need to be like all the way over, but just like a subtle lean over towards option A. And just notice what happens in your body. Is there more opening or constriction? Is there lightness or heaviness? What kind of sensations are coming up in your chest or gut or shoulders? Just notice what it feels like over in option A. And then whenever you're ready, kind of come back to the center. Take a breath here, reconnect to your feet on the ground, kind of that equal weight distribution between the two. And then whenever you're ready, you can kind of slowly lean towards option B. And we'll kind of ask the same questions. What comes up? Does it feel lighter or heavier over here? Are you drawn to it? Does it feel more resistance? What is your body communicating on option B? Once you kind of get a sense of it, I want you to return to center, back to that kind of middle place. And then if it feels safe, I'd love to invite you to actually take a step towards option A, okay? So kind of bring your feet to the center, and then whenever you're ready, just take an actual step towards option A, and then notice what shifts inside. Changes in breath. Are there any emotions that come up? Any sensations you're aware of? And then whenever you're ready, you'll kind of step back to center. Come back to your feet on the ground. Notice your spine supporting you. And then whenever you're ready, we'll do the same thing for option B. So just take that step over to the right for option B. And just notice how it feels. Does it feel any differently? I obviously had bigger breath over here. Is there a sense of expansion or contraction with B? What might your nervous system be communicating here? And then whenever you're ready, you can kind of come back to center. Yeah, maybe you can open your eyes if they've been closed. I want to just remind you, this isn't about making a quote unquote right choice. It's about learning to listen to your body's wisdom, right? So some questions to reflect on. Which direction made you feel more spacious inside? Which side felt more ease and which side felt more tension? Is there anything that your body communicated when you were on either side that maybe words or cognitions have missed? And as you're kind of getting curious about those questions, I'd love to invite you to just take a few breaths, allowing any insights to settle. You can even pause this podcast if you'd like to. Okay. Great work today, guys. I hope that this was a helpful practice for you. I think my hope with this podcast specifically, this specific episode, is not necessarily like this is going to give you a clear answer for every decision you need to make. I think this practice, this skill can help you find answers. But my main goal here is it's a very titrated way to help you begin to listen to your body's wisdom. So I hope that that's like the big takeaway here. Okay, that is all I have for this week. I'd love to take a second and just tell you about next week's episode. We are going to be talking all about finding your voice. So I don't know if you've ever had one of those moments where it felt like you really needed to say something, but everything inside just kind of shut down and no words came out. This is going to be the perfect somatic practice for those moments. So I hope that you will consider joining us next week, which leads me to the consistent podcast request. If this has been a helpful episode or you are excited about next week's episode, I'd love to to invite you to like or subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you are watching or listening so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you want to dig deeper into some of these somatic practices, this nervous system work, I'd love to invite you to check out the show notes about my monthly learning community called the Somatic Wellness Collective. It is a really affordable, accessible way to begin your own nervous system coaching. And I think that it can be a really gentle, titrated way to do it in community. And so I hope you'll consider joining us there. And as we close, I just want to remind you, your body has innate wisdom. We just have to learn how to listen to it. And that's what I'm here for.